Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to share a really beautiful story yet provoking uh, and it is about one of the most iconic people in Africa who are the Maasai. If you have ever seen some stunning photos of these tall warriors that are in bright red shukas jumping high into the air during their traditional dance or herding cattle across the open savanna, you probably have seen a Maasai. But there is something that I think many people don't realize because the Maasai who live in Kenya and the Maasai who live in Tanzania, these are two separate tribes. One, they are same people, they are same language, they speak same language, they have same traditions, they have same deep connection to their cattle and land, but of course they are divided by a border drawn by very long time ago by these colonial powers. So in this video, really, I want to explore the rich history, uh, how that border changed the lives and some common also misconception that still cause confusion today. And I also try to tell a story fairly so that both the sides of Kenya and Maasai in Kenya and the Maasai in Tanzania, all these communities can feel proud of who they are. And so let's dive in this one. First, who are exactly the Maasai? Who are these people? These are proud pastoralists whose ancestors moved into the Great Rift Valley region hundreds of years ago. They speak the Ma language and they have built a rich culture that is centered around cattle. And so to the Maasai, cattle is not just animals. It represents wealth, it represents status, and it is even a gift from God. The Maasai warriors, they call them Moranas, they are known for their strength, for their courage, and their women, they are known to create this beautiful beadwork. And they're famous, of course, jumping. And I think they call it Adumu. You may check me on this. And this is a way they celebrate life. This is the way they celebrate the strength. And this is how they celebrate being in that community. So for many, many generations, the Maasai, they moved freely. They moved freely across this vast grassland, following, rain and fresh pasture. So really their homeland, which they call Olosho, uh, was stretched across what we now call Kenya and Tanzania. By then, there were no Kenyan or Maasai, or maybe Tanzania Maasai. It was not there. It was just Maasai living as one people on one continuous land. Then it came late around 1800s, and this is the time the European uh, called for scramble for Africa. In the history of Tanzania and Kenya, we find the Britain and Germany who drew these borders across their territories. And this line they created, it cut through the heart of Maasai land. So suddenly, families and clans who had lived and moved together for centuries, they found themselves on different sides of this imaginary line. And that line eventually became the border between Kenya and Tanzania. It's very interesting and truthful across different regions. But for this group in particular, now life on each side of the border, it brought its own challenges. In Kenya, during the British colonial times, the Maasai were asked, and many say they were pressured to move from some of their best grazing lands in the Rift Valley and to go to space for, to create this space for European settlers. And they said that there were some agreements in 1904 to 1911, but somewhere along the line, the trust was broken when promises were not kept. So many, many, many Maasai, they lost access to these fertile areas that they had used for generations. And today, the Kenyan Maasai, they continue to balance their traditional way of life with some modern tourism, especially around places like Masai Mara. And in Tanzania, the story also involves some big changes because after independence, a large area were set aside for national parks and conservation. We know worldwide, everybody knows areas like the Serengeti. This Serengeti big national park. Areas like Ngolongolo, and these places are all famous. They're famous for wildlife. So the Maasai, who had lived alongside wild animals for centuries, and sometimes, they found their grazing routes restricted. So, and because of these new tourism or these new conservation efforts that were put in place. And then when you look in these recent years, there have been a lot of disputes over land use with, the government is focusing on protecting nature and of course tourism, but where Maasai communities, they're emphasizing their long history of sustainable living on the land and their need for pasture for their cattle. So both sides, they have faced real difficulties. Of course, they've lost land, pressure from conservation goals, and the challenges of keeping their culture strong in this changing world. But yet, the Maasai on both sides, again, of the borders, they have shown, I think, remarkable resilience and pride in their identity. So, I want to mention a few common misconceptions that I think often spark a debate. Because one myth is that the Maasai are simply nomads who wander without attachment to specific places. And in reality, they have deep ancestral ties to their lands and move seasonably in thoughtful ways that have helped preserve the ecosystem for hundreds of years. And another misconception is, treating Kenyan and Tanzanian Maasai as completely different groups. Uh, in truth, they share the same language, they share the same ceremonies, age set systems, and cultural values. The border created the legal difference, not history or blood. So there are also some ongoing discussions about land and conservation because some people argue that strict protection of parks is the only way to save wildlife. And others point out that Maasai communities have coexisted with lions, with elephants, with wild beasts for centuries and should have a stronger voice in decisions that affect their homes. So, and I think these are honest disagreements, not simple, maybe right or wrong. I think they deserve a thoughtful conversation because they affect lives on both ends. So, what do you think? I don't know if you've heard about these different stories about these issues, but it would be very interesting if you could share your thoughts in the comments. Um, the the Maasai story, in this case, I think it reminds us on how colonial borders drawn far away with little input from the local people, it still shaped their lives today. It raises a lot of bigger questions, even because we can touch on because let's say if countries respect the borders created in the past, how can we also fair respect the people whose borders were divided? If that question makes some sense, because the Maasai are not just victims; these are strong, dignified people who continue to adapt even while holding tightly to their culture. Because whether in Kenya or whether they're in Tanzania, They are red shukas, these red shukas or whatever they wear, the beadwork, the cattle, the songs, the jumping dances. They still remain a symbol and the pride and the resilience that all Africans can celebrate. And looking at these things is beautiful. So I have done my best to really tell this story with a balance and hopefully a respect so that the Maasai brothers and sisters on both sides of the borders can watch and feel seen. And also with the hope that if you've never heard about this group, maybe it's time for you to learn more about their cultures, their traditions, and how they live life. And hopefully, if you know about this group and maybe some of these issues, you can share some thoughts and see what you think about these disputes, maybe some misconceptions, or just pour out your thoughts and tell us. Um, I have a lot more videos coming, and I would want to hear from you first about the Maasai story that you were surprised the most about. Maybe your thoughts about the colonial border problems that most African communities are experiencing today, and uh, to prepare for the next video, because it also involves a lot of border drawing, I'll be responding to a few of your thoughts in the comment, but I want us to stay respectful and to keep people we're talking about in mind. Because these are cultures and cultures transcend for generations, so it is important that we keep the comments very respectful. But my next video is going to look at another powerful story, the story of Wanyamulenge, the people and the complex citizenship, you know, the questions and the problems they face in Democratic Republic of Congo. And I think it's another example of how history and borders and identity continue to shape the lives in the region of East Africa. Thanks again for watching. If you've made it to this point, please hit subscribe and share this to the videos to the friends you think might enjoy this video. We will see you in the next one. Thank you again.